We need to think about the role of food in our life, about good, clean sources of food. And, of course, one of the best places you can get that is at My Patriot Supply, one of our sponsors. The collapse of the border, the collapse of the economy, soaring meat prices, it's clear that there's no longer time to wait. You need to get started by preparing today. Go over to MyPatriotSupply.com, check out their complete line of preparedness products. My Patriot Supply is the home of the Patriot Pantry line of emergency food storage. If you don't have food, you're no threat to the New World Order. They're counting on you to be ever-dependent slaves to their system of control, but you can fight back. You can establish independence for yourself and for your family by securing your own private supply of storable food. And there's no better way to prepare than by this Patriot-owned company. Visit mypatriotsupply.com/Alex for special offers to listeners of this broadcast. For a limited time, they're offering additional discounts off their already low prices. That website again is mypatriotsupply.com/Alex. It was just yesterday that the New York Times said that central bankers are worried about bubbles, and they rebuked the markets. Are they worried about bubbles, or are they floating trial balloons? Here we have, out of Frankfurt, we've got an organization, they say, that represents the world's main central banks, warned on Sunday that dangerous new asset bubbles were forming even before the global economy had finished recovering from the last round of financial excess. And they say that during the boom, resources were misallocated on a huge scale. I wonder who misallocated those resources. It didn't have anything to do with the bankers, did it? It didn't have anything to do with them pumping and dumping the economy, did it? I mean, that's the model that they've always used. That's the model that they used to establish the central bank in America in the first place. It was bank panics, going in, snapping up assets at fire sale prices. That's what they always do. So when they warn about bubbles, take them very seriously. What they're really doing is floating a trial balloon. Now, before we go to the break and this special report from Alex, I want to cover some breaking gun news. In Colorado, if you remember, there were some very restrictive gun control laws that were pushed last year. Some Colorado Democrats that rammed those things through were recalled. People pushed back against that. And you had the county sheriffs of Colorado responded by vowing not to enforce the laws. This is an article from capitalisminstitute.org, and they point out now that they've gone to a trial, and the judge, a U.S. District Judge Marcia Krieger, said that that prior to 2008, the Second Amendment wasn't recognized as an individual right. Really? Really? What do you think the right of the people means? The right of the people to keep and bear arms. Every one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, except for a part of the 10th Amendment, is about individual rights being recognized against the state. They're all about individual rights. We're not talking about the free speech of NPR or the free speech of the State Department. We're talking about the free speech of individuals. We're talking about the religious freedom to exercise your religion of individuals. We're not talking about some kind of a collective right. It was always an individual right. But she maintains that until the Supreme Court said so, just recently in 2008, that it wasn't an individual right. And then listen to what else she had to say. She said, since there's no evidence that law enforcement officials are enforcing the law as written, there therefore is no threat to the Second Amendment. Do you see that screwed up logic? She's saying that the sheriffs come out and say, these laws are unenforceable and they're unconstitutional, and we're not going to do anything with these laws. So she says, well, then you don't have to worry because since they're not enforcing it, they're not a threat to your rights. Do you understand the parallel to what Obama is telling us about the NDAA and indefinite detention? He says, it's not a threat to your life, to your rights, if I say that the military can come in and arrest you, hold you indefinitely without any due process. That's not a threat to your rights because I'm not doing it right now. You understand? It is a threat to our rights when they establish this as a legal precedent. And again, going back to what's happening with the collapsing borders, they use the same techniques all the time. They always use children as a beard to take your rights. They always pass the law and the legal structure and don't do anything right away and then enforce it later on. That's what's happening at the border with NAFTA. That's what they want to do with our gun rights, with our due process rights.
This is Leanne McAdoo for InfoWarsLife.com. I'm here with Dr. Edward Group, master herbologist and chief formulator behind the InfoWars Life products. Dr. Group, what have you been hearing from women who've started taking Super Female Vitality?
You know, we've heard the reviews and feedback from Super Male Vitality, from emails to even excited callers on the radio. Now, the answer for women is here. A new formulation specifically designed for the female body, Super Female Vitality, delivers 10 key herbs that work synergistically to revitalize the unique biology of women.
I'm so glad that you guys made this for women. When he brought me home the bottle of Super Female, I had tons of energy, tons of motivation, a lot of drive. My husband thinks I've been in a better mood. Our relationship, all I can say is it's a lot better now.
I've just started taking Super Female Vitality from InfoWarsLife.com. Supplies are limited, so secure yours today at InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com, or dial 1-888-253-3139.
We're reminded that we have the government pushing back, defending the interests of these corporations that are corrupting our food supply, pushing back against your right to know what's in your food. It's a real struggle. We're really happy that the Food Babe has come on now twice on InfoWars and given us information, released information that very quickly went viral and had an immediate effect on the food suppliers. It's very hard to get information about what's in your food. They don't want you to know. And of course, in a GMO Supreme Court case not too long ago, we had a 9-0 Supreme Court decision that essentially, I believe, went very much the wrong way. Today, we had another landmark Supreme Court decision about Hobby Lobby and whether or not they can force people to do things that are against their religion. Of course, Hobby Lobby and this other company, this Conestoga Woodworks, a Mennonite company, they are very closely held companies. They're essentially individual businesses. They're not publicly traded corporations, but they're trying to tell people that they could not exercise their freedom of religion. And what I find most interesting about the Supreme Court decision is the minority opinion that we see written by Justice Ginsburg. She says that this decision is a startling breath that would allow corporations to opt out of any law they judge incompatible with their sincerely held religious beliefs. Well, why shouldn't we be the judges of what our sincerely held religious beliefs are? Who's supposed to be the judge of that? Ginsburg? The Supreme Court? We have the right to make our own decisions about what our religious beliefs are and how we're going to exercise that. Fortunately, in this case, they tried to shut down these two businesses, destroy them. In the case of Hobby Lobby, because it was a large corporation, a large company that was closely held by a family, they put $1.3 million a day fines against them. They would have shut down that business. These people stood up for their rights, fought all the way to the Supreme Court, won today, and that's a lesson for all of us. We all need to stand up for our rights. I'm just amazed at what the dissenting opinion said. She went on to say that Congress enacted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to serve a far less radical purpose. In other words, the First Amendment is too radical. When the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law, Justice Ginsburg and others believe, hey, we're going to make the laws and we're going to tell you what your religious beliefs are. I wanted to cover what's going on in Hong Kong right now. You know, there's just the end of the last week, they had an election. They had a referendum on democracy, and mainland China was not very happy with that. Now, to understand what's going on here, remember that Hong Kong was under British rule for a very long time. It was a former colony of the British, and when they turned them back to the Chinese, they did this with the understanding that it was going to be set up as what they call a SARS area, a Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. They were going to have their own executive, legislative, and judiciary branches, and they were also going to have their elections. Now, That's what they were voting on. Are they going to have free and open elections? And I think it has an interesting parallel to what happens in America right now. Now, the AP reported Beijing has pledged to allow Hong Kongers to elect their next leader, but they balked at letting them nominate their own candidates, saying that they need to be vetted by a Beijing-friendly committee. Does that sound familiar? That sounds familiar to me. As somebody who's been watching the political landscape for a long time, that's exactly the system we have here in America. We have this overreaching governance here that is two parties that really are phony opposition, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They really stand on the same side of most issues, including the collapse of the border, including the war on drugs, including the militarized industrial complex, the destruction of our civil liberties on issue after issue after issue. There's no difference between them. Can we get a different candidate? No, they've got to be vetted by the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. Just like Beijing has to vet the candidates for people in Hong Kong. They said that they're not going to let them nominate their own candidates, and they spoke back against it in a state-run paper in mainland China. The Global Times newspaper said the idea that these people would be able to choose their own candidates was, quote, mincing ludicrous. Mincing ludicrous. They have a way of turning a phrase, I guess. They also called it other things like an illegal farce, and they accused activists of sowing hatred. Where have we heard that before? They've done everything except call it racist. Of course, those are always the way that they attack everything. Beijing is only going to allow candidates who love China. Look, if you can't choose who the candidates are, if they rig the system, and our system is every bit as rigged as the system that mainland China wants to put over on the Hong Kong people, if you have to go through and do special ballot access as an independent candidate or as a third party that the main parties never have to do, that's a tremendous burden. Then even if you clear that hurdle, you can't participate in the debates. They even exclude people like Ron Paul and a two-term governor from the debates in the GOP. Then you have the corruption that's associated with the election itself. It's an incredibly corrupt system that we have in America. A lot of people got a glimpse of the dark underbelly of our electoral system in the last cycle when they saw how the Republican Party was rigging and controlling the elections, especially for those that were not outright primaries, but where they had caucuses, because it was much more difficult for them to pretend that the voters weren't voting a particular way. That's the kind of corruption that we have in America. Far more subtle, far more dangerous than just saying you're not going to do that in the public. The Chinese are pretty upfront about it, but we have a much more dangerous group of people running this country.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.